could I welcome all the campaigners here tonight, both those who've been part of the campaign from the very beginning and those who have joined during the process of it. We have some excellent speakers tonight and a special guest speaker who I'll introduce as we go through. But by way of sum up, if I can just say for those newer people who are getting involved, this all came about, this campaign, because there was an alliance between Sunderland and South Tyneside Health Trusts. Following on from that, there was a review of services and a consultation started in July of this year to last 14 weeks to look at possible closure or downgrading of a number of services in South Tyneside and to transfer those services to Sunderland. Services, for example, such as maternity, young people's accident emergency and stroke services. Now, to us who've been involved with the campaign from the beginning, if this proposal was to go ahead, we believe that it will be severely to the detriment of the people of South Tyneside, to the detriment of the people in Sunderland, whose already overflooded services are going to have even more demand on them, not to mention, and probably most importantly, a threat to our local hospital and services and the services to the people in this area. So we've been involved in a number of activities, whether it's public meetings like this, marches and demonstrations, and a petition. I don't know whether you've seen the Gazette tonight, a petition where the figures have now gone through 25,000 and we've had another 600 plus added in tonight, so we're now aiming for the 30,000 plus. So now, before I introduce the first speaker, can I just remind people that this is being filmed and there will be photographs taken, so if anybody has any objections to that, it's just to inform you that this will be going ahead and you won't be taken by surprise. And now, if I can introduce the speakers as I introduce them to speak. The first speaker will be Gemma Taylor, who has been involved in organising the campaign from the very start. Gemma?
And people hear that, yeah? So, firstly, I would like to thank all of those in the Save South Tyneside Hospital campaign, including the MPs, that have made such an important public meeting possible, where we can meet to discuss the public consultation so far, which could see the downgrading of acute children's A&E from 24 hours to 12, and moving consultant-led maternity, closing the special care baby unit, the acute stroke and inpatient obstetrics to Sunderland Royal Hospital. Secondly, during the period, Save South Tyneside Hospital campaign has encouraged people to raise their concerns about the downgrading of their health services at the consultation meetings. Every time these concerns are not listened to or ignored, our concerns include the following: the lack of clinical involvement in devising the review options for consultations. Health leaders are claiming that the options have been devised with senior clinician involvement, and many senior clinicians have said they haven't been involved or the options were decided before they were involved. In fact, no clinicians from South Tyneside Children's A&E were involved, no senior nurses, no clinical staff from the special care baby unit, and no midwives from maternity. Patient safety in those low-risk situations can quickly become high risk, such as with deteriorating conditions of children, where complications emerges during childbirth once the clinician leads services. Such those presently provided for children, young people and maternity will be removed, leaving nurse or midwife-led services. The ability of an already overstretched ambulance service to cope with longer journeys from the furthest reaches of South Tyneside to Sunderland, when thousands use these services in South Tyneside. 1,700 children attend 17,000 children attend the Children's A&E and some 1,300 to 2,000 maternity at South Tyneside. Patient safety where time to get to hospital is absolutely critical, such as in a case of a stroke, and longer travel times will result from the moving of services. Inadequate public transport links between South Tyneside and Sunderland, the published times of travel in the consultation, for which a travel company has been paid thousands, are not only unrealistic but frankly absurd. It has been said by health leaders that the expansions at Sunderland Royal Hospital has been driven by Sunderland's hospital needs for the population of Sunderland, so it has not been expanded with a view to coping with increasing numbers of patients from outside of Sunderland. Concerns over predetermined outcomes of the consultation, with no options to even explain how good the services are now and to keep clinician-led services in South Tyneside. Without these services, other acute services, including A&E, will become unviable. Concerns about moving services when services should remain because thousands of people access them. Why not share and rotate clinicians between hospitals so that they can get the practice they need to maintain their specialist skills, if numbers being treated is an issue? Fear over job losses. Although it was stated that the proposals are not predicated upon job losses, in the same time it was acknowledged that job security is not guaranteed. Their own business case boasts that there will be a saving of over 1 million in lost midwife posts. Concerns about an absurdly optimistic presentation of the consultation options as a path to excellence, rather than acknowledging that in absolute terms they are undertaking a reduction of local hospital services and that already overstretched services will be pushed to a breaking point. Other concerns include concerns over the long-term sustainability of the proposed service changes due to the significant ongoing costs to the funding of both hospitals, 35 million this year alone, a budget reduction of 18 million at South Tyneside Foundation Trust and 13 million at City Hospital Sunderland for 2017 AD. This year alone coming on the back of cuts each year. Concerns about the failure to present the context in which the consultation is taking place, one of massive cuts to both South Tyneside and Sunderland trusts. The political situation including structural change following the 2012 Health and Social Care Act that has manoeuvred services into the position. Concerns that the South Tyneside Clinical Commissioning Group and Trust Directors have adopted the STP and has not been agreed, and no status in law is not even mentioned in the health acts that have been passed. So you can see from these examples, and of course there are many more, that Save South Tyneside Hospital campaign is at the heart of empowering people outside the hospital and staff inside the hospital to take their concerns to safeguard our acute services in South Tyneside and Sunderland. The working class movement, the trade unions and professional associations in the hospital have for many years been fighting to safeguard our NHS. For example, my own union, Unison, has been working with the community for many years. It was here that the call, our hospital, our NHS and our workplace first became prominent in the fight against previous closures of services. And as well, we were among the first to express the views of all health workers that health workers add value to the society. This was in the face of the attacks of the previous coalition government to cut pay and conditions and pensions that caused many to retire with overwork and understaffing. This is why building a public service alliance of trade unions and the NHS combined with the community has become a prominent feature of our powerful campaign to safeguard the future of our hospital. We are using everything within our power to try and turn things around. As you know, we have already had a local demonstration last October and a regional demonstration in February this year, and we were part of a massive national demonstration this March for the NHS. At the end of July, hundreds attended our meeting in Brinkburn, CA, South Shields, chaired by Emma Lewell-Buck, the MP. And following the meeting, we have planned and are calling on all of you to support a march and rally in South Shields to save our hospital services and to fight for the alternative options to downgrading of these services. Already the national agenda of the May government to oppose STPs started to crumble, yet they continue to press forward with massive cuts to NHS budgets and encourage NHS England to close hospitals and hospital acute services. This is one of the main excuses for the implementation of these plans in our area, even though the Northumbria Tynemwear and North Durham STP has not been agreed and not been signed off. Save South Tyneside Hospital campaign has attended every meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board and Clinical Commissioning Group, challenged where we could and sometimes where we could not. We've attended the scrutiny committees and provided our support and briefings to councillors who sit on that committee about the concerns of both clinicians and concerns of local people. In other words, we are using every avenue we can to challenge their agenda to downgrade hospital services. The campaign also called for the consultation to be stopped alongside our MPs because of the lack of clinical involvement in devising the review options for consultation. Of course, you will know we have been accused of scaremongering, yet everything we have said so far has come to be true. For example, they told our midwives to tell their mothers-to-be that there will be no change to maternity services. What are we facing? Changes to maternity services and the loss of consultant-led service and the loss of the special care baby unit. They told us we were scaremongering when we said there was a threat to A&E services. What do we see in the first phase? The reduction in hours and possible downgrading to a nurse-led service of the children and young persons A&E. We were right, and we are right now. This is not a consultation that is just limited to one or two specialist services, but it is all-out plan to remove acute services from South Tyneside Hospital. This is what they declared in April 2016, and this is why we formed a campaign to save our hospital. I'd like to finish by giving a tribute to all the activists in South Tyneside and Sunderland. Let us remember, healthcare is a right. Jeremy Corbyn came to South Tyneside last year where he signed our petition. He pointed out that healthcare is a right and not a privilege, and we should have access to these services as close as possible to our communities. This is what we are fighting for, and with the people of South Tyneside and staff at the hospital involved, this is what will bring our alternative to the plans to downgrade our hospital. A victory for us will be a victory for everyone in the northern region. Thank you.
Well, our next speaker needs no introduction at all, Roger Nettleship.
Thanks, Chair. It's a great privilege to be here and to chair this wonderful campaign. I think a lot of the things have already been said, but I wanted to follow on from what Gemma and Stephen's introduction by saying a bit about where we are with the campaign. And as you all know, in April last year, the two trusts announced that there was going to be an alliance and declared that it's no longer safe or sustainable for either organisation to duplicate the provision of services in each location. And in a very short period after making that statement, they actually went through what Stephen described as a takeover merger, whereby the Sunderland executive simply took over the executive of South Tyneside District Hospital and South Tyneside Foundation Trust. So it was quite clear who, that this was being running, that this whole alliance was a merger and not an alliance. And our response in that period was to form the Save South Tyneside Hospital campaign and challenge this whole direction. Sorry about this. Is this better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Our whole thing was to challenge this whole direction, but it wasn't that we weren't in favour of a clinical alliance. In fact, that was something that's been going on for some years. And in fact, if anything, the campaign was saying it should be improve the clinical alliance between the two hospitals, but not from the point of view of taking away our clinical services, but from the point of view of developing both hospital's clinical services. But anyway, these initial statements they made about saying that our service was no longer safe or sustainable were frankly untrue and insulting when they were made by the Alliance. But then, of course, as Stephen has said and Gemma, they were then backed by the local clinical commissioning group. They were then backed by the NHS Improvement, and then they were signed into the Northumbria Tyne and Wear Sustainability Plan. And in fact, that is the main thing. If you look at the page on South Tyneside and Sunderland, that is the main plan, that all duplicated services are unsustainable. So right from the get-go, they had a plan to close down all acute services at South Tyneside Hospital, including critical care and A&E. But they announced it in a piecemeal way of 3 phases. And what happened with the campaign was that we opposed this sustainability and transformation plan. We vigorously opposed it. We actually put out briefings on it. And of course, not just us ourselves, but all over the country, including many figures in the whole NHS campaigning movement, put these STPs on the back burner. And effectively, after a so-called draft consultation, they were withdrawn. They've now come back again, but and maybe Allyson talk a bit more about these. But you know, clearly these plans were put on the back burner, and then there was election, of course. But the closures of our hospital never went away, and although it was set back 1 year because they intended to be talking about closing our A&E at this period, but this was set back 1 year, and then they started their first consultation in July this year, and this is why we're here today to confront this consultation on the first phase. And as people have said, they've explained what the first phase is. But one thing they don't say in the documents they put out to the public, it's actually in their business plan if you look at it, but in the documents they put out to the public, they don't talk about the actual services that we have now. And there's a reason for that, because if they were to explain the services people have now with children's 24-hour A&E, with consultant-led maternity, with stroke services, with gynecology services, they would see that what the options they're presenting are less safe, less sustainable than the ones that actually exist now. And this is not just our opinion. This is actually borne out by the fact that, as Gemma mentioned, that staff, although the Trust and the CCG are claiming that staff have been consulted, they have not been consulted. I mean, we've got documents which, from staff, from the work that's been done inside the hospital by the trade unions and staff preparing their opinions, that show clearly that most clinicians and most staff have not been consulted about these options. So what we're doing now is we're going to prepare a briefing for everyone. We're working on that at the moment. That's one of the big tasks. And we will include in that briefing the briefings that come from the staff on what their views are, which is signed by all of the staff in those departments. And we will include those. And when we publish it shortly, we will put that on the website of the campaign. And you know, quite clearly, our briefing will show that the continuation of 24/7 consultant-led children's A&E is still the safest and most sustainable option for the 17,000 children and young people which attend that unit every year. And it's built up a significant, excellent reputation which needs to be supported rather than downgraded. What they're trying to propose is a 12-hour service, 8 to 8, and or a consultant-led service, 8 to 8. But of course, anyone that goes to the children's A&E after 8 o'clock will see that that service is crowded, and children still being brought to that service after 8 o'clock. but what they're proposing will be a less safe service, where if it's not consultant-led, then a consultant will not be in the department, and if it is consultant-led, it will stop at 8 o'clock. What we will also show in the consultation is that the consultant-led maternity services, including keeping the special care baby unit, is the safest option for the 1,300 to 2,000 mothers-to-be that attend the maternity unit in South Tyneside. In spite of some of the highest adverse health issues in the area, and the facts are actually given in their own business case, the South Tyneside maternity performs better than the UK average in lower perinatal deaths, scores higher in terms of low caesarean operations and higher spontaneous births compared with other maternity units, but not only in the North East, but in the UK. If invested in, it will achieve even better results, and that's what should be happening. With stroke, the Path to Excellence recommends its complete closure, and in fact it's interesting because they said in the consultation to us that they weren't going to make what their preferred options were, but if you look in the documents they give to the public, they give the preferred option of closing the stroke unit completely, opposing their own suggestion, which is to keep acute stroke rehabilitation at South Tyneside Hospital, so patients requiring long-term hospital stroke care could be returned to South Tyneside. Anyway, closing such successful units and downgrading them will not save any significant sums of money. And that's an interesting point because we know it's driven by government cuts, but actually their own business case says the most they will save is £2 million a year for all these closures in a hospital budget of 150 million. And they also claim that it's not their aim to save money. Well, if that's the case, they should continue to invest in safe and sustainable services at both our hospitals in South Tyneside and Sunderland and stop closing down such vital services. Of course, the context of this has been mentioned is the largest ever cuts to our NHS resources by government, which is politically driven. It's a politically driven plan of privatisation. And we think this plan to shrink publicly provided NHS services and replace them with profit-driven private sector services. Of course, the private health system is the most costly and inefficient system in the world and means millions will not be able to access it if that takes place. So we know the path to excellence is not a plan to improve the NHS. That is why we're fighting it. Those of you involved in the fight to save the Jarrow Walk-in Centre, you will remember that the South Tyneside CCG, Clinical Commissioning Group, told us that the closure of Jarrow Walk-in Centre was a path to excellence, concentrating services on one site at South Tyneside District Hospital. That was very interesting because David Hambleton, who's the Chief Operating Officer, used to keep telling us that you need to give up your walk-in centre because if you allow us to move it to South Tyneside District Hospital, you'll have all the acute services there. So it'll be a seamless transfer. If you have a serious problem, you can go from the walk-in centre to the acute services. Now he's arguing for closure of acute services at South Tyneside Hospital and saying, don't worry, it's a path to excellence. You will have all these services at Sunderland Royal. But for how long? Where will it end? Because Sunderland Royal will it is coming under attack. Part of the problem is Sunderland Royal is being underfunded. It was going to run out of money in March. And it was pushed rather than voluntarily went into an alliance, financial alliance. So how can we trust these health service leaders, especially when people, staff and clinicians seem to have no control over such vital health services? And this is why, and it was great to hear we'd achieved 25,000 people sign the petition today. This is why we have so many people involved in the campaign, because people themselves are getting involved to fight for an alternative direction for South Tyneside where access to physical and mental health acute services are accessible in our district hospital for the 150,000 people that live in this area.
At the moment, we know our hospital is not perfect, suffering from massive cuts and a refusal of government to train enough doctors and nurses, and every hospital is in crisis of shortage of clinical staff. The point is, this suits the government and their health commissioners because they are using the staff shortages as an excuse to wreck our health service even further, instead of using it as a problem to solve and collaborate, whilst they're trying to solve this problem, but keeping these services going. And all of the staff that have been involved in the hospital, that's the whole discussion that they're having, is that we can do it differently. They haven't consulted us because we know how it can be done differently. They just simply want to cut our services. So let us build for the future, everyone. Let us arm ourselves with our own understanding by fighting to save both our hospital in South Tyneside and Sunderland, and contribute to the fight to safeguard the future of our NHS. And next, we're announcing that we'll have a march and rally in South Shields on October 14th. And let's make a statement of intent that we want an alternative direction that involves all of us in safeguarding the future of our healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roger, for that very concise explanation of where we are. It's the first time at this meeting that we're going to go away from the normal format. We've invited a guest speaker along tonight, and it's Allyson Pollock, who is a public health expert, and she's currently working in Newcastle. Allyson, would you like to speak?
I've been working on the researching into and campaigning against the privatisation of the NHS for around 30 years. So what's happening now is something completely different. We've all been fighting hospital and service closures for at least 20 or 30 years. But what's happening now is two big battles you have on your hands. One at the local level, to stop the privatisation of all your, to stop the closure of your health services. But the other one is at a national one, to stop the breakup and total privatisation of all our health services. Because your battle is going on all across the country. And it starts with the Health and Social Care Act of 2012. That Act removed the duty on Jeremy Hunt, who's your secretary, our Secretary of State for Health. It removed the duty to provide universal health care throughout England. That's a really big thing. That duty has been in place since 1948. So now the government doesn't need to provide health services anymore to all of you throughout England. It can quite happily close services, your GP services, your community services, your hospitals, and make you travel further and further until such times as you can't get care anymore. The other thing it did, are you able to hear me? Am I shouting too much? Is it, in that Health and Social Care Act, it made commercial contracting virtually compulsory. So these commissioners you've been hearing about are now out to tender. That means involving teams of lawyers, management consultants on both sides at enormous expense. And these contracts are being given to companies like Virgin, who have £1 billion of contracts for children with learning difficulties, people with mental health problems. They're being given to the Health Corporation of America and United Healthcare. And what the government, this government, is planning is the wholesale disposal and closure of health services, to leave a rump service behind, and for those that can afford to pay, they will go privately. And now, what the government has done is it set up the Foundation Trust hospitals as 49% structurally private. They can put half their beds, their nurses, they can generate up to half their income from private patients. That's never been the case before, ever. And they're being incentivised to do it because the government's turning off the funding and encouraging them to enter into what's called joint ventures with commercial companies, healthcare insurance companies, and private property companies. So what the government is intent upon is turning off the funding, forcing the closure of hospitals, using commercial contracting to bring in private companies, which will then decide who gets care, who doesn't care. Because remember, it's not patient choice. For the private sector, they want the freedom to choose the patients they want to treat. At the same time, the government has just undertaken a major review called the Naylor Review, which plans the wholesale privatisation and liquidation of all the NHS buildings, the assets and the hospitals. It's the great sell-off. And it says it's doing it to make social housing. And instead it's going to enter into more of these PFI deals that you've seen in Hexham, in Durham and elsewhere, which are very, very expensive. And the government's plan is to Americanise our health service. Now, you all know that 60 million people in the US have no access to health care. It's a private voluntary insurance system. You all know that denial of it's the most expensive system in the world. 80% of the gross domestic product, twice what we spend. And yet it denies 1 in 5 people any care. Women, children, older people must make their choices as to what care they can and they can't afford. And the government, remember Simon Stevens has spent time, he's the chief executive of NHS England. He spent a lot of time in America. He worked for United Healthcare. He is now in driving through these plans. They're being described as integration. They're being described as care closer to home. They're being described in all sorts of ways. But this is about the Americanization of the healthcare system. And the only way they could do it was bringing in that whole Health and Social Care Act. So it's very important to understand this is not just your battle in the local area, it's all of our battle. So you have to fight these cuts and closures, but you also have to understand why the government's doing it. It's not just doing it to close the services, it's doing it in order to enable privatisation and the entry of healthcare insurance companies. Now, I'm sure very few of you, none of us can afford private healthcare insurance and all the co-payments and everything else that goes with it. But already we're seeing some of the clinical commissioning groups stopping providing IVF, stopping providing cataracts, hips operations, you name it. There are lists being drawn up of what services will be in and what services will be out. Now, I know it's really complicated because the government is deliberately not telling you the whole story. And this month, they brought out a new big national contract called ACO. How many of you heard of the Accountable Care Organisation? Well, listen out for that word. The Accountable Care Organisation is an American term, and it is now the mechanism for rolling up all the contracts, all the clinical services, and giving it to one big private provider, like Virgin or like Bupa. So listen out for these accountable care organisations. And if you haven't been consulted or don't know about them, come and see me afterwards, because I think we need to challenge the government in the courts about this. So there are lots of things you can do. One, carry on campaigning. Carry on campaigning at local level. Two, understand the national picture. And join forces right across the country, as you're doing. And 3, you must get behind the bill, bill that reinstates the NHS, the reinstatement bill. Some of our MPs, many of the Labour MPs have signed up to it. We want them all to sign up to it because it's our only hope. We can't hook back the NHS without an Act of Parliament. An Act of Parliament brought in our NHS in 1948 when half the country had knout. An Act of Parliament has now taken it away in 2012. That's why you're facing what you're facing, the absolute dismantling and destruction of our health service. And it will only take an Act of Parliament to put it back in place. We have a bill. We need the Labour Party to get behind that bill, and all the parties, if we're going to get our NHS back, the reinstatement bill. So I'll stop there. I'm sorry if I've gone on too long, but I feel in absolute despair at what's happening. I have never seen anything like the ruin and the catastrophe that is about to take place. And thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for continuing to fight.
I think you will agree that Alyson's been a welcome addition to tonight's meeting. Her contribution has been fantastic. I can assure you all Labour MPs will support that, and many of us already have. The only problem we've had, we won 2 votes on Wednesday, one for National Health Service pay and the other one about student fees, and the government have ignored them both. But we'll carry on fighting in Parliament, as indeed we are in the streets of South Tyneside, and spreading the story as you described. If I can get the next speaker, who is, what number on mine is? Marion Langley. If you'd like to get up and say a few words.
I hope you can all hear us. I've usually got quite a big mouth anyway, and I'll do my best to make sure you can hear us. I think I play a slightly different role in this. We've been fighting on the inside, as we said before, supporting the campaign within the organisation as Unison members. And our Unison members and our health service are run by the staff in that hospital. The staff in that hospital are dedicated, they're absolutely 100% behind the services that are provided by South Tyneside. One of the worries that we've got, and I know it doesn't affect the campaign, however, one of the worries we've got is that the hospital is in a massive change. It is the process of having a situation where we've now chipped our payroll staff to Sunderland, so we're not even paid by our own organisation. We are in the process of putting a whole load of staff, chipping them into a private arm's length company within Sunderland, and that is the first set of staff to leave our organisation and go into a private company. I said when Steve Williamson arrived as a chief exec, when he arrived as a chief exec, there was muted about those situations where our staff would be and maybe looking at ways and means of cutting down the workforce. And Sunderland Arms Length Company at the time was mentioned. I've got to say, I did say that over my dead body would you be taking domestics into G4S, which is what was in Sunderland. I'm hoping that changes. But it doesn't stop the argument of those staff now going into choice in Sunderland, and I've got to say it's the thin end of the wedge. Now that's the future of the hospital at the moment. Anybody who's been in the hospital over the last few weeks will have seen a massive change. It feels empty, and as I said at the last meeting, we feel that the lifeblood is being drained towards Sunderland from South Tyneside. Now I've got to say, we made a commitment at the last meeting that we would meet with Sunderland branches and make sure that we did a joint meeting. We've had that. We met on the 9th of August and we had our first joint branch meeting, if you like, of those who have to deal with the staff issues in both organisations. So I met with my counterpart in Sunderland, and we came up with a plan to meet on a regular basis to make sure that we update everyone in the process and the progress we are making on I would say on a daily basis, when you look at the petition being signed on a regular basis and those numbers escalating. We made a commitment to make sure that the staff were involved. Those staff who have been very committed to this campaign in all of those services, I've met with all of those staff. I've met with a number of staff who have got their own proposals, which is an alternative to what our organisation is putting forward. I would also say that some of the information that has been passed by our senior teams, if you like, to what we would have as the scrutiny committee, they have given information that we don't believe is correct. That was challenged outside of the scrutiny committee. I'd like to see that addressed, because from my point of view, we feel our staff are being told one thing and the reality is something totally different. As I said, Unison's given a commitment to make sure that the staff come forward with their clear proposals and their alternatives. But let's make it clear. The staff don't want platitudes and empty promises. The staff want action, they want to be involved, they want to make sure their voices are heard. I don't want to see my members, our staff, going down the road of this reorganisation of change, re-service orientation to Sunderland, and then be the scapegoat to the members of the public that knock on the door and say, can I come in because my child's not breathing? And the door is shut. Can you just imagine the mental health of our staff when those sort of issues come about? The staff themselves are committed to giving South Tyneside the best service possible that they could ever give. They have been committed campaigners throughout this. They want to make sure that the members of the public are well aware of what's going on. It's worrying to them that they've had numerous conversations with members of the public bringing their children through or bringing their families in, and they are not aware of the change. There is something wrong when we're looking at a consultation where nobody, and I mean nobody, on one particular day comes through the door and knows what's going on. The public need to be more astute, more aware of the severity of what is about to happen in South Tyneside. These changes do mean that there could be tragedy at the door of South Tyneside. We are not talking about the what ifs, it's the when it happens, because we're told by our clinicians, our nursing teams, that if they've been doing records themselves, if they looked at the time that door was closed, how many staff, how many members of the public have come through that door after that door was shut, and the risk to that happening. Do you know that if a child goes to Peds A&E, I'll say, they go to Peds A&E and they need to be transferred to Sunderland, you ain't got an ambulance sitting at the door. That's the thing that we haven't got. We ain't got an ambulance sitting at the door waiting. You might have, but it might have another patient to take. So we don't know that that's going to be a guarantee. However, think about the other side of that. If you've got that patient sitting there and you need an ambulance and it's not sitting at your doorstep, do you know that that ambulance will not come quickly enough because the child is classed as being in a place of care, a place of safety, because there's clinicians there? These are things that the public need to be very, very well aware of. Our staff know this, but the public need to know this. As far as I'm concerned, I will fight to my dying day for South Tyneside. I live and breathe South Tyneside. I've lived there all my life, And as far as I'm concerned, not only have I been a dedicated worker in South Tyneside for the last 30 years, but as far as I'm concerned, it does give the best care possible with the service provision that we've got. What we don't want is to see the end of that service. We don't want to see a second-rate service because we haven't got the door open. What we don't want is the maternity staff being farmed over to Sunderland. We need to make sure that we've got our own maternity staff. The other side of that is, you know, when you're looking at some of the proposals are saying that there will be, or there could be. Well, we want a guarantee to say that those services will stay there. We know they keep telling us that it's not money. I don't know whether I could believe that, because on numerous occasions we've heard other councillors and politicians tell us that there's a money issue there. So from my point of view, I need to have that you know, put in writing, because we're not getting that from the trust. We're getting it, it's not money orientated, but when you look at the service provision for maternity and the massive reduction in finances that can bring, it can only be done by one thing: reducing the staffing. That worries us. It worries the people of South Tyneside, because the maternity service is something that's been held up in South Tyneside and in the region as a service of excellence. With regards to other services, the paediatric service, I've got to say I'm really, really confused as to why in 2012 the service was held up as a service of excellence. It's the way forward, and many other organisations have taken that model on. But then to be told, just before the announcement of this consultation, it was never sustainable. In 2012, there was a financial report to say that this is not sustainable. As far as I'm concerned, why did they wait from 2012 to 2017 to try and find staff, to try and make sure that that service was sustainable? There's got to be something somewhere. I think one of the other issues is the transport. It's a major, major issue. As I've mentioned before, if you've got an appointment at Sunderland, that's not an emergency. You might have to walk there, but you'd have to get the appointment. We know the bus services within South Tyneside are appalling. To get to Sunderland, it's 3 buses at least. As far as I'm concerned, I've got a car, I can go, and that's fine for me and maybe my family. But not everybody has a car in South Tyneside. We're one of the worst deprived areas in the region, so you've got to consider the fact that people need to have transport. Transport's only one thing. I think at the scrutiny committee there was a gentleman actually asked the question, well, what do you do in the middle of the night? Well, yeah, if you've got a sick child and the A&E is closed at South Tyneside, how are you going to get that child at Sunderland? You're going to have to phone for an ambulance, because if you turn up at the hospital when that door's shut, they're going to wait for an ambulance till it comes. You know, what does that say? The public transport's one thing, and I've got to say that's probably one of the major concerns for the majority of South Tyneside. But for those who've got an emergency, an ambulance is the form of transport you need. And as I say, the transport from NIAS, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen anybody from NIAS at any of the consultation meetings, although I do know that there has been discussions and there will be a consultation, supposed to be the biggest consultation event, because transport throughout this consultation has been one of the major concerns that we've all had. However, it's at the Little Haven and it's in the furthest away part of South Shields with very little transport to get there. However, the other thing is that will the ambulances be available? As far as I'm concerned, we need to know that we've got some transport to get our patients there. I'm very, very sceptical about that. As far as I'm concerned, we need to make sure that we're singing from the same song sheet. The transport is the major issue, whether you've got a patient, you know, carrying a patient into A&E, and whether you can get them to a safe place to make sure that they're cared for. The worry for us and the staff in South Tyneside, is that there will be a tragedy there. Certainly the South Tyneside staff don't want that, and they'll do their utmost best to make sure that the service is safe for everybody. But they've got a big fight on their hands. They are fighting not only this service, but all of the other services. The other phases that we've got, I'm afraid one of the worries I think we've got also is that the 3 phases may turn into 2, because there was a little bit of a question over the second 2 phases that we've got at the scrutiny committee. I felt I was hearing them may join those 2 together. That worries me in itself. However, I'll give that commitment again. I will fight as much as I possibly can. I love South Tyneside. I love South Tyneside Hospital. It's been great for my family, been great for my relatives. As far as I'm concerned, I want it to be great for the next generation. I've just had a lovely little great grandson. As far as I'm concerned, I want that service to be there for him and his family. I would just like to take one little thing. Every single person in this room has family, has friends. Facebook's a great communicator when you want to tell everybody everything nice. It's the worst devil's communication when you don't want anybody to know something. But I would say, please tell everybody. Not plead from the staff. The request, should I say, the request from the staff at South Tyneside is please let as many public know what is happening in South Tyneside so that you can have a voice at the consultations and make sure your voices are heard. The staff will do that within the 4 walls of the hospital, half a dozen walls in the hospital, but they'll do their best to make sure that the service is safe for the rest of South Tyneside for many years to come, if possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Marion, for that excellent description about the cares and concerns and the actual experiences of the staff that you represent. And it's an insight for us to find out what's going on in the hospital. Last speaker tonight, before we take contributions from the floor, from the top table, is Emma Lewell-Buck, the MP for South Shields.
Thanks, Stephen, for having me in Jarrow. Pleasure being here. Now, we've already heard that over a year ago, South Tyneside and Sunderland hospital management teams merged. This was at the same time as the government's sustainability and transformation plans were being imposed on local areas. These plans are to be written up and implemented by local clinical commissioning groups who look after all of the health services in our area alongside the hospital trusts. The plans are officially supposed to be targeted at improving health and care. But in reality, as Allyson said, right across England, people are discovering that these are the biggest plans by any government ever to shut down and privatise our NHS for once and for all. Because supposedly, alongside the government's mantra of improving health and social care, Jeremy Hunt has said all of these areas must make £5 billion worth of savings across England. 29. Oh, sorry, in this area. I have remained firm in my view from day one, despite many people denouncing me and other campaigners as scaremongering, that from the day the management teams merged, the plan was to downgrade South Tyneside Hospital and ship off as many of our services as possible over to Sunderland. And guess what? The consultation plans now before us, South Tyneside loses out drastically to Sunderland. Not only did we lose our stroke unit some time back without any consultation whatsoever, our gynaecology, our maternity and urgent children's emergency services are now all at risk. But it's worth remembering, as Roger and Marion have said, this is only phase 1 of a long consultation. There should be another 2 consultations that will take place on what is left of our hospital. The final one is to include accident and emergency. I simply refuse to accept that any consultation that is predicated on massive cuts against a backdrop of massive cuts to social care and other services will do absolutely anything at all to improve the health and social care that people in South Tyneside receive. In fact, I think we're all clever enough to realise it's going to do exactly the opposite. But I am not alone in this view. The Trust and the Clinical Commissioning Group are stating that the proposals before us have been formulated with full cooperation of the clinicians in South Tyneside Hospital. But these clinicians and staff have came to me repeatedly, provided me with extensive evidence and given that evidence to the council to say that they have in fact been actively blocked out of formulating these proposals and that the consultation outcomes will be a loss of services and that they are predetermined and have been from the outset. I don't see how on earth they can expect members of the public in South Tyneside to trust a consultation that raises such serious questions about transparency and due process. I made it clear time and time again, and I want to make it clear here again tonight. The only way that this consultation can be halted and these allegations properly investigated and addressed is by the councillors on the Joint Scrutiny Committee of our council and Sunderland referring matters to the Secretary of State for Health. I have asked now for this to be done 4 times. I provided the legislative framework that makes the request totally viable, yet I am being continually refused. I made the request again recently when I was invited to come and speak to the committee. The South Tyneside chair tried to silence me and refused to answer mine and my constituents' questions. In the meeting, I asked a mixture of questions to the committee, the CCG and the Trust. I asked what scrutiny actually took place on the draft consultation proposals before they were ever published. I asked what their views were on each of the proposals and options before them. I asked if they agreed or disagreed with the travel time in the proposals. I asked the Trust what lessons they had learned from the shambles they made of the Jarrow walk-in consultation. I asked them how many jobs would be at risk across the proposals. And I also asked the committee to carry out one of the key functions of scrutiny, to scrutinise our executive. They have made no comment at all on the fact that the leader of South Tyneside Council is a paid director of the hospital, chairs the Health and Wellbeing Board that holds the CCG to account, who are driving this entire process. This is a conflict of interest and it is raised with me and others time and time again. We need this point addressing. I just want to end by saying, when people have tried to silence me in the past, they've never got very far. And it's generally been because I'm on the right track and I'm onto something. So I'm going to keep this fight up. Our campaign is going to keep the fight up. The thousands who've signed our petition, I'm damn sure are going to keep this fight up. Because quite frankly, I never will, and nor should any of us sit back while our neighbours and our friends and other people in South Tyneside lives are being put at risk.
Well, thanks, Emma. We'll take questions from the floor now. If you feel you can, if you can identify yourself where you're from, but by no means feel obliged, you must do so. So if we can see this gentleman here. Yes. Did you want to make a comment? Yes.
Yeah, my name's Rosalind Copeland and I'm out with fellow members in the Market Square in Sunderland every Saturday. And what really got me last Saturday, we actually had a doctor from Sunderland Royal assigned and a nurse who worked in the theatres. And they spent a lot of time with us and they actually said Sunderland Royal Hospital is at breaking point. They cannot cope now. And the theatre nurse said the number of patients who have got to the door of the theatre and have had to be turned away because an emergency came in and took that bed. And we are saying to people in Sunderland, they're walking blindly into something which they, at the moment a lot of them are not bothered. But we keep saying to them, and this is one thing we say at the meetings in the Market Square, if it goes on the way it is, you'll be lying on the grass outside of Sunderland Royal because there'll be no beds for them. And we've got to get this over to people in Sunderland, not to be complacent, to actually to get behind this and sign it in as many people as we possibly can. Thank you.
It's Jo Liddell. There was a couple of points brought up at the scrutiny committee that obviously as a member of the public you don't ask any questions, but I thought they weren't very clear on, and it was to do with, this is not a cost-saving exercise, this is a pathway to excellence. And there's just two things I had wanted to ask that I thought were interesting. And one is that the stroke unit in South Tyneside has been closed, and there was 20 beds there. And when he was questioned on this, I can't remember his name, he said, well, not all those beds were taken up by stroke patients. So therefore, they didn't really need 20 beds. But my question would have been, have you opened any more beds in Sunderland, for a start, because obviously there's more people born there, but more pertinently, in South Tyneside, it says to me that there are not enough beds in other wards, and having been in and out of hospital regularly, I know it's very hard to find a bed in the ward that you're supposed to be on and that you get put anywhere. So that says that actually they needed, say 20 of those, say out of 20 beds there was 6 that were regularly used by other patients, then they presumably need 6 extra beds. Have they opened any extra beds, or have they just left it as is? The other point that I wanted to ask about was, he was talking about the maternity services, and said that all the data showed that midwife-led services were safe. But what I'd want to know is a bit more detail about that data. Is there a percentage of babies that die, or mothers that die, or anything like that? Because it wasn't explained, and I think if you actually looked at the data, which I don't have, but the question would be, is that zero? Is that zero risk? Is there no babies died that needed consultant care when they only had midwife care, which is brilliant, I have to say, but sometimes you need more. Because if it's even only one baby that dies in that year, that's too many. You can't answer me questions, but they're what I wanted to ask at the time.
Again, it was from one of the scrutiny meetings I went to. It was coming back to something that I know Emma's been concerned about, the level of, shall we say, impartiality of the consultation. One of the things I know, I was sat directly behind the CEO and the lady who was running the consultation, and they were very much, shall we say, working together a little more than they should have been. She seems to, she's already formed an opinion very, very clearly. When anybody expressed dislike to something that they'd heard, one of the things which has just been mentioned about the cost, it's not a cost-saving exercise. The public gasped, and she turned around and gave such a horrific look at those members of the public, and is clearly biased, and obviously that's something I know Emma's raising, but I just thought that might be something that people need to be aware of as well, that it's not an impartial process and it's clear to see. And if you haven't seen these people yourself, it is something that you do need to know.
I didn't know that the idea of the Nealon report was to free up some of the hospitals to make social housing. But if that's the case, is that not going to increase the need for hospitals?
Just a question of Roger. When we had been to some of the meetings that were held at the Customs House, we were told that there was going to be a separate consultation on transport, because on page 94 of the document that they gave us said that you can get from the top end of heaven to Sunderland Hospital in 12 minutes. They said, well, what we'll do is we'll have a separate meeting about that. Is that moved on any, that we're going to get this, or when are we going to get it? Or
Yeah, we'll answer them too.
Well, I can't really answer that question. We've got it somewhere. It has been set up. It's the last meeting, I think. I'll tell you the
I'll be there in 3 minutes.
I think it was just the question on June as well, wasn't it, round about the issue about the beds in Joanne, sorry, yeah, in the beds for
have there ordered any more beds in South Tyneside for? Obviously, what's in August?
No, so what happened is, again, the temporary move of the stroke unit, again, that was down to due to the concern of clinicians. They had a local consultant working in the stroke unit, so on the 5th of December, they said that the temporary move to the stroke unit, which had 20 beds in South Tyneside and 39 beds in Sunderland, well, that is the biggest concern, though, because there was a temporary move to Sunderland, they didn't temporarily move them beds over either. So again, they still stand at 39 beds. So to us, that's a complete cut.
Yeah.
There's only 39 beds at Sunderland for both of the population.
And presumably a few less for people from other departments that have taken up those beds at different times.
Yeah.
Which was his excuse that he didn't need 20 beds.
As part of the consultation, the Trust RC and the Medical Director, Shaz Wahid, is saying that again, that the 39 beds is enough in that area. To cover, and it is quite difficult because when you look at it again, nobody's got a crystal ball to know how many people unfortunately might end up taking a stroke in both Sunderland and South Tyneside, so there is a concern on that. The issue around the maternity services and around the midwife-led, again, if anybody's seen Hartlepool is exactly the same, it's got a midwife-led service. And again, even the MP, who's Mike Hill, had said when he took up his position in the election, when he got the MPs for Hartlepool, he turned around and said that it's very rare that somebody is born at Hartlepool, because the fact is, no mother will take the risk. And again, this is the issue that we've got, that Shaz Wahid, again the medical director, when questioned at the consultation, a member of the public says, how long, if either the baby comes distressed, how long have you got for that baby, for that mother and baby that would be blue light in the Sunderland? He said 25 to 30 minutes, till a midwife put the hand up and went, you have got 9 minutes. And at that point, there's no way you can get an ambulance from South Tyneside to Sunderland. You couldn't even get a helicopter in that time. And this is the issue we face. But again, unless, if either mothers who are low risk, there isn't a choice. They keep on referring, well, if you've got a midwife-led, you've got a choice. You haven't got a choice. If you either a medium or a high risk, the only way you have a choice if you're low risk. That's all you've got. So that is an absolute massive concern. But again, if nobody takes that up and thinks, look, I don't want to take the risk, I'll go to Sunderland, Gateshead or Newcastle. The fact is, what happens at that point, unless they have 320 births going through that hospital in that year, otherwise what they'll do, it'll close. It will go from a downgrading to an absolute closure and a complete loss of maternity services in South Tyneside.
Just to mention just about the transport thing, we're going to have one to Seattle. I think it's October the 4th of October at the Seattle. I don't know where they get the money from for these expensive places, but I hope we're not sitting round tables like a mattress tea party. In relation to the transport, when I was the army, I was a lead scout. I was taught how to measure distances. Now I've travelled by car, by bus, and on foot. And on page 92 of this document, it says each hospital is within 800 metres of a metro station. But from Tyneside to South Tyneside Hospital, it's 1 mile. From Millfield Metro to Sunderland Royal Hospital, it's a 20 minutes walk. And I was at the pub the other night, I was talking to a university professor, and I showed him this. And he, like me, I've got all these post-it notes, picked horses straight away. They said it's not driven by finances. But if you look at option 1 on page 49, it will save savings of £510,000. On page 67, it's option 1, saving 1.3 million. Option 2, to save 1.16 million. And you go on and look at them, and you pick holes in all these things. And the girl who stood up who they've paid a lot of money to, this independent, so-called independent transport and who analyse it through, she must have been on Google or something, you know, saying that you can get to Sunderland Hospital in 10 or 20 minutes. And our response was, yes, we have Formula 1 driver, 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe. But, as I say, I did it by car from the outskirts of town where I live at Keaton Park. It took me 35 minutes. And that was relatively 10 o'clock in the morning, not in the rush hour. And then you've got to think about 3 o'clock in the morning. You're talking about £18 with a taxi. I then went on the bus, and I think you've got a copy of the thing that I did. And it took me 35 minutes to get to a bus station, and then I had to wait 20 minutes for a bus to Sunderland Royal. And on the way back, I had to dash, because I had about 2 minutes to the connection to get to Shields. Because there's only other bus station to stop outside T-Cars. Now, if you're elderly, well, I'm that way myself, but if you're elderly or with a few kids, it's going to take you a lot longer. So if you miss the connection, you'll be waiting another 20 minutes. And that took us about well over an hour. So this consultation document from the transport people, you can pick holes in that. And as I say, I've got all these things here, and we really need to take these people to task and say, you know, this is wrong, you know. Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman right at the back. Lady, is it? I can't see. Somebody in front of you.
I just object. I'm not going to change my sex for it. Anyhow, my name's Joyce Smith, and I'm just a very concerned member of the public. And there was a lady saying that there was a 20-bed ward in the stroke unit, and the concern with them had been that they weren't used. Well, I've had quite a few people come to me and say that they've had to go in hospital for an operation, and when obviously they've needed post-operative care, they've been put in ward 19. And when they've objected, they've been told everybody who's over a certain age, like my age would be in there, over retirement age, is always put into ward 19, which, bless them, is a mentally challenged ward. And that is disgraceful, because I'm 80, and I mean, I wouldn't like to be surrounded by, you know, nobody to talk to and get a good conversation out of. That's one thing. The other thing is that I was the one that gave the 660 extra signatures tonight, and all of the people wasn't done to get a clap, because I want to explain to them. The only people who refused, believe it or not, was nursing staff, and they said it was part of the employment thing that they weren't allowed to sign it. Now, I find that very difficult to believe, but they were all medical staff who said they weren't allowed to sign it. And then finally, and I'll shut up. Sorry.
Carry on, that's interesting about the nursing staff being banned from
yeah. Well, they weren't all nursing staff either. They just said, oh, we are employed by the National Health Service, and we are not. It's part of our terms and conditions of employment. We are not allowed to sign anything like that. And they were the only ones who refused, by the way. I've got doctors and physiotherapists, and I just carry it everywhere I go. Right. And then lastly, I did read that in the Ainsley College Hospital in Liverpool, they very recently opened a £35 million acute and emergency care service, to which our own Prince William went down and was talking to the patients. So why are they getting them opened and we are getting them closed? And they seem to be using our budget cuts to open it, because it's the same sort of price range, if you know. So thank you for listening.
Just to answer your question, I'm going to answer both of them, because I'll tell you about Ward 19 as well. Ward 19 is an elderly care ward. It's not a mental health MIU ward at all. It does care for elderly patients. Whether they've got dementia or infections can sometimes mean that they are a little bit confused. However, I wouldn't have said that that was every patient over a certain age. It does depend on whether we've got beds, and as those staff in South Tyneside know, we have a very regular update on our computers throughout the day telling us that we have bed alerts. So we know that there are at times shortages of beds. The other issue with regards to staff, it's one of my biggest concerns, is protecting our staff. And you must understand that they must stay within the guidance of our organisation. I don't believe our organisation has told anyone not to sign a petition, but the staff are frightened. You can understand staff's concern of raising their heads above the parapet in this sort of consultation. They become targets, and we certainly don't want to make our staff the scapegoat. I can tell you now that we, as Unison, have put petitions out, and we've had many hundreds of signatures also. So those staff who are telling you that may be saying that because they don't know who you are, and also they're a little bit scared of what the consequences are. And I'm sure you will all take that and understand their circumstances. I can tell you there are hundreds of signatures from our staff, but in their own workplace it is difficult if they're seen to be doing that sort of thing. I think if you recall, I think at the last meeting we had those leaflets that were put out about that public meeting. We had managers go around and take those leaflets away. We were fine putting our Unison logo on the top of all of the consultation meetings because they were fine with that. Any alternative they don't want to know. So please accept the fact that staff may be scared, and that's the reason they haven't signed your petition, but they have signed ours.
Within the National Health Service premises, I was asking. It was at the Marsden Inn at the Great North Road.
All right.
That the refusal side. And the other one about Ward 19, there was 2 people actually couldn't get any sleep from people screaming for whatever reason. I know we don't know what we've got to come to ourselves, don't get me wrong. And one lady actually had to sign herself out. She was in such a nervous state with people screaming and crying and yelling, you know. So, you know, we know that they've got to go somewhere, bless them. But if there was beds there or wards, there should be
absolutely.
Sort of,
and we would say we need more beds. If you recall, one of the issues that we've got throughout the whole of the health service is that there's been a reduction in beds in every hospital up and down the country. Hence the reason you were sitting in A&E a lot longer and corridors were full of patients. One of the reasons that we've had over the years for the reduction in wards and departments within the health service is because they've closed beds on a regular occurrence. I dare say if you look at the figures of how many beds we've got today in South Tyneside, they don't resemble anything you had 5 years, let alone 10 years ago. They don't resemble anything we had 5 years ago.
I just wanted to come in on the back of what Marion said about staff. There was a senior consultant last year who I was dealing with quite regularly around the proposals, who now has said that his job is on the line for speaking to me, and if he talks to me, he has to talk to me outside of the hospital on his mobile phone. He's not allowed to use the hospital phones. He's not allowed to have his secretary pass a message on. So they really are clamping down on any voices of dissent at the hospital. So I understand why people are jittery and are a bit frightened of signing petitions and putting their head above the parapet, because if they do, some of them are being very clearly told, you'll not work in this hospital ever again. And that's what happened to one of the senior consultants who was working closely with me last year.
Yes. Hi. I'm a long-standing patient of the NHS and as a director. Just a comment about housing, about Sunderland Council are now selling off Parks, West Park, and selling off Princess Anne Park for housing. So again, there's still not going to be sufficient beds for the influx. So they're not just going to sell land off for hospital housing, for social housing on their land. Also, this land, greenbelt land, is going to be targeted. Transport, we said about ambulance, taxis, not every trust pays for transport for taxi. So if you've got a hospital appointment and you've got to go by taxi, you don't get a taxi money reimbursed. There is an knock-on effect in Sunderland as well. I can't get an appointment in our hospital. I have to travel. I had a choice to go to Bladen, North Shields, all over. I can't even get patient transport when I want it. You've got to fit the criteria. It's just getting worse in Sunderland because I live there. Seem to get into the hospital, even where I live, there's 2 buses. It's very difficult, especially if there's an accident on the A19 in this end traffic. That the A19 is going to be revamped. That's going to hold, that's going to make it worse. It's just chaotic, and I'm totally against this merger because it hasn't been thought out at all. I mean, I can't even get a bed for an operation for what I need. I have to go to Scotland to have my operation. I can have a bed, I can have a local, and I can have a sedation. But I can't get that in our area. I might have to have part of my ear removed. I can't get that done local. I can have a local, but who's going to look after me? I'm in one in and out. I have to go Edinburgh. And it's we don't have the surgeons to perform on people. We're not attracting the right surgeons to this area. It's just completely rubbish. The consultations that I've been to, there was a lady sitting on our table with Emma. I'm getting a bit disordered. And when you go around, she doesn't say who she is, but I know she is the governor of the hospital. Anything we say, she condemns. She did it before when I homed in on transport. She downed it. Transport's not the problem. We just got the taxi and things like that. Sorry for her to say that, but she's running with the CCG, and the consultations are just not poorly attended.
Yeah, I think they're excellent points, can I say it?
Yeah.
We'll move on to...
Hiya, I'm Sonia. My little boy's on Facebook for the Unison Hospital. He goes to, I'm going to get upset if I'm not. He's the one that goes to A&E at 8 o'clock at night with breathing difficulties and drive. I've got a car, but I can't drive because I can't breathe. It takes me 8 minutes to get from Marsden to the hospital. I ring them and say we're on the way. They're ready for him. He's oxygen, he's ready. So how am I going to get to Sunderland? How am I going to do it? I've got another child, my partner's at work. What's the time of that ambulance coming to my house for him? He's got chronic lung disease. He was born prem at 27 weeks. How am I going to do it? How do I do it? It's so, I'm really scared for him because that child could be him standing at the door and not breathing. So what do I do then? Do you know what I mean? What do I do? And it's a case of I can't do any more than what I'm trying to do for him. So all the staff know him. Dr. Bolton knows him. He's been in children's services from being brought out of hospital in 3-month prem. They all know him. So it's a case of, yes, he can go to Sunderland, but nobody knows him. Nobody's prepped for when he gets there to say, right, he needs this, this, this and this. He's on oxygen for days on end. He was on oxygen for the first year of his life. So what do? I can't get to Sunderland in the middle of the night. I need an ambulance. How long? Half an hour?
More than half an hour.
And I can't, and I can drive, but I can't drive because I'm saying to him. And I've got another little boy, he's joined me, that we normally go at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, because when he goes to bed, his breathing starts. He gets this because it's windy outside. You know, he can't play out at school because it's windy. He's on a SATs machine because his SATs drop from 98 to 88. And then he put him in coma because of the wind. In the summer holidays, he was in hospital. And he's driving winter yet. So what do I do? Do you know what I mean? I need answers. I need, do you know?
Can I say say the biggest thing you can do is turn up at the consultations and repeat your story. The staff have got alternatives that they want to put forward, and we will work with them and the organisation to put those alternatives forward. But there's nobody better than somebody who experiences like yourself, who can put that story to the people who have to make that decision. Absolutely.
That's right. Ronnie?
Stephen, sorry. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm new to this. I had the good opportunity to come tonight with my colleague.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sorry. I've got a very loud voice, sorry. I'm just saying, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I came along tonight because John McCabe told us I don't get to many places because I need transport and help. I just feel after listening to all the stories from the professionals and from the ordinary public, we've all got stories to tell. And basically, I want to tell mine because, you know, I think it's a part of what we're talking about now. Because without those clinicians, doctors, nurses, God knows who else, if it wasn't for their professionalism and help, I know for a fact I wouldn't be here tonight. I've been to pearly gates twice over my time. It started when I was a young bloke, 21 years old. I was a diabetic. And I had to go on. Sorry. What's this, an X-ray? Just to put in my mouth, should I know? Sorry, can you hear us now?
Yes.
That's good, I can it. But anyway, just to reaffirm that I wanted to say we should all tell our stories, let everybody hear them, and it'll bring out how much we really need these people. We need the NHS, need it in the way to be run properly, because to me, it's more than the crown jewels. It should be protected by whichever party's in government. We should not be allowed to touch it. It belongs to the people. And like I said, I've been right through the mill. I know there's people worse than me, but the fact is, I've been to pearly gates twice. I've had double transplants. I'm blind. God knows what else has happened to us. If it wasn't for mountains of drugs, I wouldn't be here. And because of this reason, it frightens me to think what I've been told tonight about governments wanting to actually rip apart our national health system, hive it all out to American companies or whoever, and yet there's thousands and thousands of people in all parts of England, South Tyneside being one of them, where they're just draining the blood from the whole system. All they're doing is blaming one against the other, and at the same time, they're just taking everything off us. What we're supposed to do, every household in the whole community should be up, not just so many followers of Roger or Stephen or whoever. We should all be there. But tell you the truth, I think it's getting that worse now, and I feel so strongly about it. There should be a national strike. And put these people where they belong.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Thank you,
Hi, I'm working from Sunderland. Just thank all the speakers, they've been absolutely excellent tonight. Thank you.
Easier for people who can't hear.
Okay, Allyson, I wanted to ask you where the reinstatement of the Health and Social Care Act is in Parliament. I know it's been in before. Did it get anywhere? And what is Jeremy Corbyn's attitude to it? And Jonathan Ashwood, the Deputy, the Speaker on Health? Because, as you say, really that's got to be changed, hasn't it? And it's all very well coming here and we all support you, but how do we actually get that in Parliament apart from getting... I mean, if we can get Jeremy Corbyn to put a three-line whip out, then we might get somewhere. Emma, I just wanted to ask you what you're going to do about scrutiny, because I'd heard how terrible they were to you. I didn't go to the meeting, I wasn't able to, but they were really rude to you. And how do you address that? What do we do about it? Because if you can't get anywhere, then I don't know how we're going to change things. And just ask our MPs how we can get the Sunderland MPs a bit more involved, whether there's anything you can do about that, because it's a bit in my backyard business, isn't it? I think Julie does understand it, but I'm not sure about where Bridget Phillipson stands, because she used to be a health spokesman, didn't she, for prevention? So she should be there, really, with you, shouldn't she, at these meetings?
Yeah. In terms of what happened at the health scrutiny meeting, I don't really think I have to raise it because many members of the public have wrote to me already and said they're going to be writing into the council to complain about the way I was treated because their MPs there were afforded a lot more respect and answers to the questions that they raised. I don't know why I was treated that way. All I was doing was my job, which is to ask questions on behalf of my constituents. They were questions that constituents asked me to ask. My constituents are pretty angry that they weren't answered. I have wrote to the scrutiny committee and said I would like those responded to in writing, and I'm going to continue to pursue the referral to the Secretary of State for Health because everything I have heard so far tonight is pointing to the fact that this consultation is flawed, that they're putting before us proposals that are not safe. The scrutiny committee is the only avenue we have here to refer this into the Secretary of State for Health. And woe betide them if they don't refer this in. There are Tory councils doing this right across the country. Our council should be stepping up and doing this. This is outrageous.
This lady was before me, Stephen.
Oh, sorry, we'll get you, don't worry. No, go on, sorry.
I just wanted to know how the concerns of the staff of the children's services are going to be addressed. I'm not sure how many councillors are here, but we have a request for the councillors to come and meet the staff so that we can actually express our concerns and what the local councillors are actually doing for the people of South Tyneside. So is anyone here prepared to come and meet the staff of South Tyneside Children's Services?
Absolutely, I'm one of them. Thanks, Stephen. I think the lady's probably led very nicely into what I've got to say. I'm one of the Jarrow councillors and was very much involved with the Jarrow Walking Centre closure, and we all worked as a team in doing that. I think we're kind of getting on the brink of not working in that team, and I think we need to stick together. As a Jarrow councillor, as a South Tyneside councillor, we have very recently set up a regional scrutiny body that will meet with various councillors who were balloted because there were that many of us that wanted to be on it. We've also just set up, by way of our leader, a team with Unison that we're going to be very heavily involved in order to put a joint proposal forward, particularly to do with our maternity, because we think that's something that we can actually win on, because we're, in some ways fighting a losing battle with the stroke. But Councillor McCabe had actually put forward a request for all of this work to be done, and we've got councillors all around the room in here tonight who are absolutely on board. So please don't any of you think that we're not, because we're all human beings. We've all got families. I've got 2 girls that were born at South Tyneside, a mum that nearly died being treated, and is here now at 87, living because of the treatment she received in South Tyneside. So I think we've really, really got to work together. And I think absolutely clearly is the fact that this decision will be made by the CCG. Yes, we may well be able to change those options and work with them and work with the staff. By God, yes, we do want to work with the staff. They are at the forefront of this. They know what the cost savings are. They know where the services are that are needed, and they are the best people, not the hierarchy who are that far removed from the clinical services to be making these decisions and putting these options forward. But be absolutely assured that we have an understanding as to why at the moment it can't be referred to the Secretary of State. And my lay understanding from what I've been advised is because the consultation isn't over, and that's the explanation we've been given by legal. And I'm not, Emma, you and I have worked together for a very long time, and I'm not refuting anything that you're saying. We're friends, and I'm not refuting that. But what I'm saying is we've legally been advised as councillors that that's the reason. So we cannot go up against the law, but we are absolutely with you 1,000,000%, and I will happily, with any group of councillors, meet with staff. Absolutely.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, just come in.
just in case somebody can hear.
Hope everybody can hear me all right. I wasn't going to speak tonight, I just wanted to come and listen, and I brought Ronnie, who's our branch secretary. I'm political officer for Jarrow CLP as well. I've always been a fighter, and I was very interested in what you said, Allyson, about Sir Simon Stevens, especially the piece where you said he did time in America. I think he should do time. That's you know. On a more serious note, in my background, I was the chair of the Regional Health Committee, which stretched from Stockton-on-Tees to Berwick-on-Tweed, and I'm not new to the ideas that Allyson was talking about. So I already knew that West Midlands NHS was run by Virgin and, you know, Cornwall and the things that's happening all throughout the country. But people are waking up, and I think that's part of why we're here tonight, is to waken up. I'm disappointed in the number of people who've come here, but, you know, we can all be disciples and go out there and preach the gospel to the people who need the gospel preaching to. We are on board. This campaign's been really, really successful. With Gemma and Roger, and I'm not just singling them out, I'm talking about this lad at the back as well, and there are other people in the room who've successfully fought over the years. But just, we've been asked about the council, so I think I'd concentrate on what the council are trying to do. Bearing in mind that this campaign started, as far as I'm concerned, locally with Jarrow Walking Centre. And what happened in the Jarrow Walking Centre was, as part of the overview committee at that particular time, we referred that decision to close Palmer's to the Secretary of State. He came back with 6 bullet points. 3 of them weren't satisfied by the CCG. 1 was transport, 1 was parking, and I can't remember what the other one was now, but they failed to do it. But in any event, what happened was they moved Palmer's Walking Centre. So in the first year that they moved Palmer's Walking Centre to South Tyneside Hospital, we had 27,000 visits to Palmer's in the last year of its opening. NHS England figures, because I chair a committee called the People's Committee, it's not a Stanless committee, although we're 100 years after the revolution, but it's about anything that's to do with people. And we found that it was 11,000 people, they only had 16,000 visits to South Tyneside Hospital. What happened to the 11,000 other people? Were they self-medicating? Were they travelling elsewhere? Who knows? Some people probably suffered for it. And it makes me laugh about this health and well-being, because is it health and well-being to have, and we've heard Sonia talking about the distress that she's had. There are cases, you know, and you mentioned it, Marion, about your car ownership in this area. I'm talking about Jarrow and Heaven here, I'm not talking about South Tyneside now. Jarrow and Heaven car ownership is 45%. That's 55% of people don't have a car. And it's a long way from Luke's Lane and the west end of Heaven to Sunderland Royal. What they're trying to do is dismiss those people in the Heaven area, and I've already flagged this up at the very first meeting of the consultation. They're dismissing the people in Heaven completely because they want them to disappear to either QE or the RBI. Are the RBI and the QE ready for the amount of people that need to go up there? No. There needs to be a national plan. I'll come back to that very briefly for 20 seconds lastly. What the council are doing is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which I set up, which wasn't my remit, as People's Chairman, it should have been down to the Overview Chairman to set that up. I contacted Councillor Norman Wright from Sunderland, and I formed that Joint Scrutiny Committee. Subsequently, democratically, I was told that I wouldn't be part of that committee. I wonder why. You know, I begin to wonder a lot of things, because I came into politics to represent people like Sonia. That's who I came in to represent, not myself. And I think that's a message to go back to all the colleagues that we've got, because we do try our best, but sometimes we're not focused enough on what we need to do. So I'm glad there's a lot of councillors here today, because we need to discuss this in another place, at a level that's higher than what it is now. Because the services loss will happen, and it will happen because, as Allyson has said, the government are hell-bent on doing it. The only way that's going to be avoided is if there's a landslide election. I'm sorry if I'm getting political here. A landslide election where a government comes in and says that the NHS is the #1 priority for the country. And we're going to have a national drugs policy where instead of Smith, Klein, Beecham making millions and billions of profits, we set up our own national drug line. We have succession plan for doctors and nurses. We have succession plan for physiotherapists, etc., etc., etc. I could stand up here all day. I'm not going to. There's a whole host of issues. But the issue with the Overview Committee is laughable in this respect. The information is public, and at every Overview Committee I go to, I ask on the minutes of the meeting, can we have an update on what's happening with the Joint Scrutiny Committee? No, you can't, because there's nothing being decided yet. So these things need to be addressed, Stephen, and you know, that's a matter for the councillors. You know, what are your beliefs? What are you here for? What's the Labour Party say about local services? As much as you can, keep them local. And that's my belief, and that's what I fight for every day of my life. I fight for local people. And I hope that this lady, you know, we can have a discussion very soon after the meeting, and we'll try and take something forward for you and for anybody else in here. Councillors are there, not for themselves, they're there to represent their communities. There's many councillors here tonight, some from South Shields, some from Jarrow and some from Heaven. Please don't be afraid to pick up the phone, send an email, whatever. If you have a concern, that's what we're here for, and we'll need to help you. And as for the campaign, you know, I hope it keeps rolling on, and I wish we could roll back to October 1917, where we all get armed and we all go to the streets. But that's a joke, ladies and gentlemen, just in case anybody puts that on Facebook. You know, I'm not suggesting by any measure that we take violence and terrorism as a way forward. I am not. But sometimes it makes you feel like that. Thank you.
Is this on, is it?
Yeah.
It's just to go on, obviously, I think the last three questions that have been raised. Again, I mean, obviously from a campaign's point of view, again, we fully agree that our concerns that clinicians haven't been involved in this process says it all. That again, if not now, at some point, they should be referred to the Secretary of State. But again, I think, you know, fully understand what's being said, and I think that was an issue that was raised at the joint scrutiny, that again the two solicitors were going to get together, because again one was saying it couldn't be referred until after, but looking at it, it was the issue, well, why can it not be referred? Other places have been referred, why in the middle of consultation? So that is something that needs to be thrashed out legally with the two solicitors. Again, and I think it was something what John mentioned around the Jarrow Organ Centre and the point the referral to the Secretary of State, and 6 recommendations were supposed to be met before the closure of that Organ Centre. Again, 3 out of the 6 might have been met, but the rest weren't, and they still, to this date, haven't been met. So again, what we are looking at from obviously a Unison perspective is that we cannot put all of our eggs in one basket. Because at the end of the day, referring it to the Secretary of State, even though we agree and we fully back it, the fact is, we know what it's like. It's a vicious circle that, again, what they do is they put recommendations on, they come back, and the overall decision still lies with that CCG. Again, our concerns with what them did is sometimes predetermined as well. But again, so what we need to do, as well as backing that, is also look and work with the staff around an alternative to these options. So again, regardless, there's the avenue of Secretary of State, but there's also been there to look for the alternative. And again, that was the issue that was raised by Geraldine around the Labour group. The Labour group have to respond and will respond to the consultation. And again, that was something that was picked up, that again, they do want to work with Unison to try and put that staff alternative across. Again, without a doubt, Unison is the lead union on the campaign right the way across. And I think hopefully from what we do and speaking to staff, that again the alternatives we get from staff, that the Labour group hopefully do adopt that and use that as part of their formal consultation response. The issue around obviously the staff and the joint scrutiny, when they're going to listen, I know fine well the joint scrutiny will listen to members of staff. They will bring them forward to that committee for evidence. Again, they've received signed documentation from staff to say that they haven't been involved in the process. Again, it might feel that the 15th of October is creeping, but if that 15th of October and staff still haven't been listened to, then what Unison will do is we will ask for an extension to this consultation. But please be heard, you will be heard, and that is a guarantee from the joint scrutiny, because they've got to remain neutral to the process, and any evidence that comes in front of them, they've got to listen to them, and they will listen to the concerns of the clinicians that haven't had their opportunity to be involved in the drawing up of these proposals.
I'll just come in quickly. This issue about, can it not be referred, we are clarifying it to the council solicitor from the House of Commons solicitor. Trust me, those of you who know me know I would not go down this route and would not push it if it wasn't possible. And other local authorities are doing it in the middle of the consultation process. It is totally possible. And what I would just like to say is, politically, the government are in a very different place than we're in to when you were going through the Jarrow walk-in situation. If you keep pressure on this government, and if every single area keeps banging these referrals into the Secretary of State, they might rethink again. They are very weak right now. They're rethinking on many, many things. So the only solution mightn't be to have another general election. It might just be that we all keep the pressure on them. And doing that will put them under immense pressure. And if they think they are losing votes right across England and losing support, and they're going to have people protesting right across the country, then trust me, the way they are right now, they will think again. On the point about the bill, you asked about the NHS reinstatement bill, because it was a general election, it now ceases to exist. It didn't get any further. Bills kind of go through a process in the House, have first reading, second reading, third, and then they become an Act of Parliament. It only got to first reading, there was a general election called, so it now ceases to exist. So unless somebody else reintroduces it, it'll go no further.
Can I just clarify what I know our dedicated member of staff is really asking for, and that is that anyone from the council, anyone from the scrutiny committee, the staff are welcoming them to their department to see how they work, to see what the experience is. They would welcome you at any time.
And you have
the staff
one immediate
mentioned
volunteer.
Sorry?
You have one immediate volunteer.
Right. The staff have welcomed that. I don't know if you'd need to clear that with the trust.
I'll check.
But from the staff, they have said they would welcome you into their department to see how they work, especially at those times of night when they've said the doors would be closed.
Thanks. Allyson has got to leave now, I believe. So, but thanks a lot for your contribution.
It's fantastic to see your MPs here. It's really rare to see MPs and councillors, and I think it's all worth fighting for, and we're all in it together, countrywide and locally. So keep fighting, and don't forget the NHS reinstatement bill. Thank you for your support for that too.
Paul? Good evening, Paul Fabian. Just to say that this week alone, this is the 4th meeting I've been at, and it's the 3rd one this week that's purely concerned with this campaign. The other one, the campaign actually came up as a subject and became very serious during it. I was also at a meeting last week, which for the ambulance service, it was amazing how it wasn't discussed. Yeah. What was discussed was the new transport system that they intend to bring in. Everything that came out this week, though, in all of those 3 meetings, was that no one considers this safe. In fact, they consider it dangerous. The vast majority considered that the government had already made the decision, and this is only to say that when they bring in their final decision, that they actually consulted with the people. To consult, you don't have to be listened to. It doesn't matter what you say. At consultation, we've all done it when we've been union officials. You consult with the minister. You consult with the management.
and then they turn around and put on the bit of paper, we consulted. Yeah? And that's it. And then they bring in their decisions. So, everyone, in actual fact, is worried. Everyone that have been, that is all the meetings, and they covered people of all sorts of, what you would say, strata of society, professionalism, occupations, non-occupations, and it covered all of that. And it also covered representatives of organisations, individuals, and everyone, except, sorry, there was one person who happened to be involved with the CCG who wouldn't say anything. Everyone considered this was dangerous. The options that are given are all move it to Sunderland and South Shields come second. Yeah? Everything. It's not a choice.
It's tilted.
Yeah? To them, a lot of these people, it seems that it's an exercise that they are doing. And tonight we've heard real life, real life, real life, and we are real life. We aren't an exercise. I'm not an exercise. I'm a person. I'm getting on a bit. Yeah? I'm doddering. Not really. So, what it's got to be, we've got to think of people. The healthcare is for people. It's not for an exercise. It's not for figures. They say it's nothing to do with cost. Everything that they put forward has a figure on the bottom of it, or at the top. And then they say it's going to be 1 million, but not for the cost. Most of the savings they put down, in actual fact, they look big to someone who's on benefits. It's less than a fraction of 1% of the budget. And as a matter of fact, there's 12 minutes from South Tyneside to Sunderland. A professional driver sat and worked it out for one of the meetings. And to do it, you cannot drop below, at any stage of that journey, you cannot drop below 50 miles an hour. Okay? And that 12 minutes does not include the time that it takes to get the person out of the bed to the ambulance, and then at the other end, out the ambulance to the bed. Transport. The only people who can afford this on transport are pensioners. People like me. We've got the pass, but we get on the transport. If it takes well half a day, you don't have to say to the boss that we're going to miss time. It doesn't make any difference to that. You know, we can take the time. Again, in another meeting where it was worked out, for the average person from South Shields or Heaven to go and visit someone in Sunderland with the transport, with the everything else that's needed, just, you know, human things like having a cup of tea, possibly a sandwich, £20 every time. Roughly £20. Can anybody here really say they can afford £20 every time they go to visit somebody? If you're visiting them every day because they're in hospital, that's £140. How many people on benefits get £140 a week? How many people on a pension get £140 a week? You? And the final thing, which again came out from series of looking into things, the South Tyneside review for development. Every patch of ground inside the South Tyneside District Hospital has a site marking a number to say it is eligible or it can be recognised for development. Not one bit of Sunderland's is. Every bit of it, every car park, every patch of grass in South Tyneside District grounds is marked down as a potential development site. I'm very interested to see when the final one comes out in a few weeks' time, the so-called final plan, and see if they are still in there. If they are still in there, that site is now going to become a housing estate with an old folks home and possibly an outpatient apartment at the end of it. Thank you. Thank you very
much. 2 hours of excellent debate. So if you don't mind, I'll take 2 more questions, and then we'll close the meeting. David, did you want to say something?
It's been addressed about
excellent.
The extension of the
Can I, Madam, you've already spoken, so I'll give somebody else a chance, but that's okay. The lady at the back.
I was just wondering if there's any chance we can get the Sunderland Echo and the Gazette on board. I work at South Tyneside as well, and there's loads of public who don't know about this. Not everyone's on Facebook. We need the Gazette, we need the Sunderland Echo behind us, and what needs to say in those documents is actually so they can understand that the services are going to change. And I was just wondering if we could get them on board.
Yeah, the Gazette was supposed to be here tonight. I don't know, are they here? Yes, we do contact the press all the time, and in fact, we did get an article into the Gazette this morning about this meeting. So yeah, it's very important. We're doing everything we can to involve the media. But the other thing, can I come back with a couple of things? You were raising the question about beds in the hospital. We haven't talked about gynecology, the inpatient gynecology, and sorry, we haven't talked about the gynecology.
We haven't talked about the inpatient gynecology much in the campaign, but I think this is something maybe, I don't know if Marion can help here, because the thing is, it doesn't make sense to me. If you look at, we're looking at the documents going through all of this stuff, it doesn't make sense because we have a theatre which does gynecological operations, and what they're saying is that they no longer have inpatient gynecological service at the hospital, but they will have day surgery. Now, any clinician will tell you that a day patient can turn into a inpatient because they cannot go home either that night or whatever. Now, the way the service works now is that we have 6 surgical beds which can be used as gynecological beds. So what are they talking about? Are they talking about closing 6 surgical beds? I think this is something we need to explore anyway. I thought we'd just get that into the record. On the other thing that's come up on the Emma's was talking about the Joint Scrutiny Committee. Andy has put up the film of the Joint Scrutiny meeting on the website. So it's got the transcription of the contributions that the unions and the MPs made to the Scrutiny Committee, as well as a transcription. So go to our website. It's under news. It's just click on news and you'll get it. But we'll circulate that as well. And then finally, just wanted to say that it's been a wonderful meeting, and we've ordered 10,000 leaflets, which are coming on Tuesday for our demonstration in October. So we will go on to a new project to have, a really good demonstration in South Shields at the end of the consultation to make our point that we want to keep these services. Thank you.
Question the lady at the back.
Yeah, hi, my name's Helen. I'm here because I'm Sonia's friend and I got dragged along here. But that's the first I'd heard about this campaign. I've heard lots of statements while I've been sat here at the back, and I've heard lots of heartfelt stories like Sonia's, and I'm moved by those. But what are you doing for the next stage? What happens next? So I go away, and I'm a mum of 3, and I'm in the dancing world, I'm in the gymnastics world, I work at a local school, so I'll go back and I'll talk to people at my local, where I work, all about what's happened tonight, and all about you people who've done so much so far that I've not heard about. But what are you doing next? What about this corruption that you're telling me is happening at the council, which by no means is I've heard about this for years and I'm only 38. What are we doing about it? What are we doing about it? What is the next stage? Who are these committees? I don't know what the GCC is. I don't know what your Scrutiny Commission is. What do I do about that? What do I tell people about it? How do I do something about it? Because you telling, with all due respect, you tell me you're going to fight. I'm thrilled. But what is that fight? What does that consist of? What are you doing? Do I write to people? Do I turn up to meetings? Do I bring all the gymnastic mums with me whose children are not going to get any what? You're telling me you're going to fight, but you're not telling me how to fight. That's what we need next. And that's not just people here, but that's you're not just the Gazette's as corrupt as the council. They're in it, I know that. And yeah. So telling me that It's no surprise to me that the Gazette's not here. You need an advert in the Gazette. This campaign needs to use its money in that way, so that you're not relying on these people who've been corrupting in each other's pockets for years and years to help you. They're not going to help you. We need to do more like that. And I see
I mean, starting from everybody that's here, I mean, we hold a regular campaign meeting every fortnight. The next one is on Monday to the Alberta at Jarrow, and also then 2 weeks after that we'll have one at Ocean Road. It's at Ocean Road, South Shields. So again, at the end of the day, it's getting involved in that campaign. Again, why we have this, why we ask people to register when they come and sign in, is because at the end of the day we want people's email addresses. We can keep you up to date what we're doing. We've got Facebook pages, we've got Twitter pages, again we've got websites. Again, it is hard sometimes to get the message out, because sometimes you're trying to speak to people, you're passing leaflets, but again somebody either thinks you're selling something. The issue about the Gazette and the Sunderland Echo, good idea. We've had many stories in, especially the Gazette, but let's be honest, only about 10% of the people in the area buy the Gazette. So to be honest, what we need is people that come to these meetings to spread that word. We are doing our best. Again, the last meeting that we had, that was chaired by Emma Lewell-Buck MP, over 10,000 leaflets went out. Again, yes, it was Friday. Again, it was the last day of term. 20,000 leaflets that went out. Sorry, obviously, again, yes, we did get another batch. So we are trying to get out as much as we can. Again, look at the petition, over 25,000 people have signed it, and if you have a look from either the online to the paper version, the majority of people that signed that petition have been from a paper version, and that's been through face-to-face engagement. But it is difficult. We are quite a big campaign now. I think it's probably one of the best campaigns that is ever probably run, especially in South Tyneside. Again, it is having a significant effect, because at the end of the day, this first phase of this consultation was supposed to start in November of last year. But due to the fact that obviously the campaign is challenged, they've worked with the joint scrutiny. Again, there has been that challenge from there. That was put back. Again, the staff as well raising their concerns of not being involved. Again, paediatrics I think stands out a mile due to the staff willing to come forward to raise them issues. That's what's put it back. So even though sometimes it is difficult and you think, well, what's really happening? The fight has been there for a year, and I can say I cannot thank enough of the campaign people that's in here, because we can't do it on our own. But all the people here is just to send that message back. Look at the website, get involved, and if need be, come to the campaign on Monday. Again, look at the actions that were put forward. Again, any updates are sent out. Roger obviously does that on a regular basis as the chair, and also myself as the coordinator. But that's all I can say, is everybody has got a part to play in this, because again, it's not just our fight, it is your fight.
Well, you've already spoken. From the panel at the top, could I thank everybody here who's come along and showed an interest this evening, indeed, who've taken interest in the whole campaign. We'll leave here knowing that it's a cuts-driven subject. It's driven by government, but decisions are taken locally. And our message to them from here tonight and all throughout the campaign is saying that we are the many and you are the few. So it's our health service, not yours, so keep your grubby hands off it.